Hi and welcome to another episode of Delaware County Political News Meet the Expert. Today we are here with Dr. Howard Robboy. Dr. Robboy taught sociology for 40 years, 34 years at the College of New Jersey, where he was the chair of the sociology department for 8 years. He was a member of the advisory board for security on campus for 5 years and published 4 editions of a co-edited book of readings in sociology. He also published 12 articles in refereed journals. Howard, thank you for joining us here today on Delaware County Political News.
Pleasure to be here.
Howard, you've been a sociology professor for 40 years. What is the study of sociology?
Sociology is the study of society and how it affects the individual, and also you could say how the individual affects society. And so basically we're looking for patterns of how people act as it varies by race, social class, gender, ethnicity, religion, and we find that people of these various different categories on certain different areas of life react differently. And that's what we look for to make generalizations, if I'm being too vague.
Not at all. What are some of the methodologies of a sociologist?
Well, the basic, one of the assumptions we make is that things aren't always the way they seem. So they appear one way on the surface, but to find out what's going on, you have to sort of look beyond that. So we do observation. There's another type of methodology called participant observation. We're a part of a group and observe at the same time. There's survey research, which people fill out questionnaires. There's interviewing, intensive interviews, where you sit down and talk to someone in detail, and by discussing things in detail, you get all kinds of information. These are just some of the ways we use to gather data.
Why should we study sociology?
Well, in one realm, sociology, besides keep increasing knowledge about how things work, keeps us honest, because people discover things about you and everybody else that is again different from the way it may appear on the outside. It runs against the individualism value of our society, where people think it's all up to the individual. We know that's not the case. I mean, the individual has some control over his or her behavior, but we're looking at how society impacts on this. And again, we look for patterns.
Tell me about social class, how that factors into the analysis.
Well, generally, a lot of people think if you ask them, they'll say they're middle class, but we have to divide it, and there's different schemes of upper class, upper middle class, lower middle class, upper lower class, and then poor at the bottom. And where you fall in this hierarchy has a great impact on how you perceive the world and how you act. And it varies. I'll give you one brief example. If someone is caught stealing in a store and they're taken to court, it's called shoplifting. If that person is further up in the class structure, they will be defined as a kleptomaniac and need counseling. So if you're further down the class structure, you're a criminal. If you're further up in the class structure, you did the same thing, but you need counseling. Generally, the higher you are in the class structure, the more likely you're being viewed as a good person. And therefore, good people don't do bad things. So therefore, there's a great breadth of tolerance in terms of what people do before they're labeled as deviant. And they're allowed to have, quote, idiosyncrasies. As you go further down the class structure, that range of accepted behavior is much narrower. And if you step out of line there, all of a sudden, you're deviant, because people expect you more likely to be deviant. So therefore, people at the top, it's white-collar crime, get away with all kinds of things, and people further down are going to get caught. And also, the penalties as you go further up in the class structure are much lighter. White-collar crime, person could steal millions of dollars in white-collar crime and get 2 years in a federal prison, which is like a country club prison. Someone who holds up 6 liquor stores will be in a state prison somewhere for a long period of time. So we assume equality. We're said all men and women are created equal, but we know that's not the case. And so how the inequality comes in, look, you can see it in terms of social class. Certain religions have higher status than the others, and minorities have lower status. So, I mean, there's many kinds of ways in which we're not all equal, and how we're not equal are some of the patterns that we look for.
Please give us some examples on how we can use sociology to control our environment and take practical lessons from it.
Okay. Again, things don't always seem the way they are. I mean, that's a good assumption. It's not true. Nothing's true 100%, but that's a pretty good assumption. And so, a sociologist, Bill Chambliss, was out in Seattle, at the University of Washington, and he wanted to study political corruption. And they said, don't study Seattle. I mean, it's a new city. Go to Chicago. Go to some old city where there's a political machine. There you're going to have lots of corruption.
You said they, other sociologists?
Yeah, or people in town, So he went around Seattle, and he noticed there were these illegal poker games going on in bars. There was a back room.
He ignored their advice and decided to do it anyway.
Yeah, right. And so he finds all kinds of corruption. And then why were these poker games allowed to go on? Because they were paying people off. All right. And then he kept studying this corruption going up the ladder to the point where he connected it to Spokane, the capital, and eventually by the end of his book, it got to Washington. So he has these national, from national and statewide and local corruption going on, and in a place where it wasn't supposed to be there because it's a new city. So my point is, a sociology point is, if you see corruption in a place like Seattle where it's not supposed to be going on, take it to somewhere else with a similar background, and you're probably, if you sniff around, you're going to find it. I mean, not 100% of the time. And the thing about it is, if you look around and you don't see it, well, then you're done. That's okay. But if you do see it, well, then you have a choice of doing something about it.
What did Lincoln Stephan learn when he studied major cities? Now, again, this was
1906 or something like that.
It was 1906, Howard, but he's still respected, and this is still, as sociologists, we can still take something from him, can't we?
Yeah, I mean, his book is called The Shame of the Cities. And when he did Philadelphia, the chapter is called Corrupt and Contented. And Philadelphia had a political machine that was in power for a long time. In fact, the Republicans were in power until the 50s. And so it was a real tight machine, and things were, it was extremely corrupt, and there weren't many ways of exposing it. So, I mean, he found this around the country, in different areas of the country, so that Philadelphia was just one of many.
And the point of that was, he found it in major cities. He found machines in cities. Isn't that right, Howard?
Right. I mean, even around here, look how many mayors historically from Camden are in prison, have been in prison, as well as Atlantic City. I mean, it's there's nothing new about this.
And what was that phenomenon about cities that had machines or centralized power without a checks and balance or a separation of power system?
Well, I mean, basically the assumption is the power corrupts. I mean, there's, again, not 100% of the time, but most of the time. And so when people are in power, and they're in power for a long time, you can expect corruption to occur. I mean, shouldn't be a surprise that it's occurring. It's to be, oh, well, what do you expect? I mean, like New Jersey, which is entirely, they say, and Louisiana for the most corrupt state in the country, I always say they should have a corruption museum, because New Jersey has so many great examples of absurd corruption, obscene corruption. But you're going to have corruption, as I said, in most places. Now, the degree will vary, and the extent of it will vary, but you can assume that you're going to have, a corruption if you look around enough. Yeah. And one of the reasons for this is we're all human. People get in office. To get in office, you need money to get contributions, and people expect something back for their contributions to help you get in office. They expect favors. Or you've been working in an industry for a long time. You run for political office. You have friends in that industry, so they start getting contracts. I mean, it's almost like human nature to take care of your friends, and this is corruption.
And in cities, especially larger cities, you need more money, and you need more friends to be able to hold power, so you're going to find a larger corruption as Lincoln Step
Right,
fell.
right. And also the larger the city, the more obscure things can get, because you can't see things very clearly. If you're in a small town, it's very easy to see things. In a large city, it's much more difficult to see things.
What is the impact of society on people?
Many different ways. As I said, social class, race, ethnicity, religion, age. As we go from one category to another, it affects us. And it affects the way we behave and the way we look at the world. Oftentimes we're not aware of these differences because we sort of stay with people who are similar to us. And if you leave your safety zone and go out into different places, you'll see people who are very different. And it's like the Philadelphia accent, all right? But you go out to Lancaster County, you don't hear the Philadelphia accent anymore. It's the Midwest. Once you get beyond 50 miles, it's the Midwest in terms of how people speak. Well, if you don't go out there, you don't realize that people speak differently if you only stay in Philadelphia. Same thing in New York with a New York accent.
Can you give me some examples of sociology in terms of economics? For instance, Paul Blumberg's The Predatory Society.
Yeah, sure. What Blumberg found, and it's a fascinating book, that he interviewed students, both traditional and non-traditional students, and the part-time jobs they had. This was done at Queens College in New York. When he asked them these questions, he asked them, make a list of all the jobs you've ever had. And what is it in those jobs where you're required to do something that was either illegal or unethical? And over the number of years, he compiled all these and wrote this book. And he has it done by chapters based upon different types of businesses. And he finds that in every business, almost every business, there's things done that are dishonest against the public. This is where the owner of the store were doing things to cheat the public.
Do you recall any examples that you can give?
Yes.
Okay, could you give us a few?
Okay, now I'm not implicating all dry cleaners, all right? But many dry cleaners, it's funny, even in class when I had a student whose parents were dry cleaners, I'd say, the cleaning fluid is petroleum based, it's expensive. And what they find is, from people who work in dry cleaners, some dry cleaners, and I say some, don't change the fluid as often as they should, so that you take your clothes in to get cleaned and it maybe get cleaned in other people's dirt if you take it in the wrong time. The other thing is, sometimes when people bring their garments in, they look at a suit or a dress and see it's not stained, it's not dirty. So what they'll do then is press it and send it out without cleaning it. And if there's a spot on there that they didn't see, we made a mistake, we'll clean it again for you. But in a sense, what they're doing is just pressing it and sending it out. Florists have been known, when you go to a wedding, you want to take the bouquets from the table home. If you go to a funeral, you don't bring flowers home from the funeral. So what he found in his study, that when they do wreaths for a funeral, they have very pretty flowers in the front, but dead flowers in the back to give it depth. And you're paying for the dead flowers. Of course, you don't know that because you never check the wreath to find out what's there. I mean, these are just little things where they're not likely to get caught, but they can make extra money. Like in a produce place where they put nicer strawberries at the top and less nice strawberries at the bottom of the pint that's wrapped up and you buy, something like that. Little things here and there, the nickel and dime you, but on a week's business, they're nickel and diming lots of people, and in turn those nickels and dimes turn into dollars.
And the point is that there's not one industry that's bad, whether it's a produce stand or a dry cleaner or a law office. Since I'm asking the question, Howard, we lawyers certainly are targets of doing the same thing. The point is that it's human nature, that you find this type of behavior throughout society.
Yeah.
It's a human behavior through all types of social classes.
Give me another example. Fish. When you buy fish, you think it's flounder, it may be some other fish that's substituted for flounder, but how would you know? Most people, if you go to a restaurant and you order flounder, you may not be getting flounder, you may be getting flounder, but when they put the sauce on it and all that, most people would never know. So they may be using tilapia or some less pollock or some less expensive fish, substituting for some more expensive fish. I mean, this is the kind of things that he's talking about.
Right.
And the thing is, though, it also goes on a higher level. That you can also expect this is going on in corporations. Like if you look at illegal dump sites, New Jersey is number one. I think it was 70 some illegal federal, not state, but federal dump sites in the state of New Jersey, because over the years, the people were dumping stuff into the water, into the ground, and they didn't care. And so, I mean, it's just another way they could save money, but not disposing of it properly. So they didn't care. But there's corruption, I mean, in the business world. It's profit oriented, and people want to skirt the way of doing it the correct way to make extra profits.
Right, and just to restate, the title of the book wasn't This One Predatory Business or Predatory Economics. It's the Predatory Society.
Yeah.
It's everyone. It's human behavior was the whole premise of his book. Correct,
yeah.
Howard?
For example, look what's happening in the airline industry over the years, where you get less and less leg room. And so if you're my size, 6'1", you don't fly certain bargain airlines because you don't want your knees behind your ears, but they make more money the more seats they can pile on the plane. So the public, gradually they lower their standards of acceptable behavior, and and this continues on.
Howard, let's take this analysis back to politics.
Okay.
If there's a political study of a certain demographic or certain social conditions, and you find corruption based upon those certain conditions, what can viewers predict about their own neighborhoods, townships, or counties if they see similar conditions in their own neighborhood, township, or county?
I mean, I think Flint, Michigan with the water is a good example. One of the things people are now doing is having their water tested to find out the quality of their water because of the corruption in Flint, Michigan. It's just one thing. I mean, there's when you see it one place, people on their own will say, and they'll start looking around, because you should expect, what it does is keep people honest. Because if people know you're looking around, they're more likely to be honest because they don't want to get caught. People don't expect to get caught, and they don't want to get caught. So if they're sensitive that people are looking around, then they will, for a while, play by the rules. Sociology raises your consciousness that things aren't the way they seem. And if you're thinking about corruption, Philadelphia still has examples of corruption in recent years, and it's its history. You have the political machine. Here you have a long-standing political machine, and people have to give out favors, and one way or the other, contracts or doing this versus doing that, and it's not the way it should be.
What similarities do you need to see in both places?
Well, it depends what we're looking at.
What are the factors that you need to see in the two separate places? Could you give me examples of factors that you want, examples of the types of factors that you can see from one place to the other?
Yeah, okay. Historically, and Philadelphia is a great example of it, GM got together with the tire companies and the oil companies starting in the 30s to get rid of trolleys around the country because they don't use, GM didn't make trolleys. Petroleum companies don't make money because they don't use petroleum and they don't have rubber tires. So they went around on a lobbying effort around the country and got cities all across the country to get rid of their trolleys and put in buses, as happened in Philadelphia in about 57. And so there's a great documentary on this called Taken for a Ride that shows what happened in one city, happened in Detroit, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and so. And so, the public found themselves on old smelly buses in the old days rather than on the trolley cars, which they liked. And this was done by three corporation or types of industries getting together, and this is the impact on the public. But you can see it, similar things happening in various cities. You look for it here, there it is over there. So what happened in Detroit happened in Cleveland.
So if I can summarize what you're telling me, if you have similar demographics, social factors, and other economic circumstances in one area, and if our viewers can identify the same social factors, demographics, and economic circumstances in their own areas, they can know that they are likely to find similar behavior going on in their own location.
Right. That's the problem. So once if you can raise people's consciousness, then they'll start looking. And one of the things that was found in the Predatory Society is that most people don't expect to get cheated. And the more you trust the shop owner or whoever it is, the more likely you are to get cheated. So, but if you don't trust them, then they can't cheat you.
So what sociology does is it raises
consciousness, and it can then expose the process, to go behind the scenes and see what's going on. And once you get your consciousness raised, then you may put pressure on the government. I mean, Flint, Michigan is a horrible example of this. But poor people, got together and now are putting pressure, or have put pressure on the government. And now the state come in and the feds have come in, and people are going to jail who made these bad decisions.
How accurately does sociology predict human behavior?
Not 100%, I'll never claim that. But what we do is compare it against randomness. What is a random chance? What is randomly what's likely is occurring, and then the degree from which we depart from the randomness strengthens our patterns, because it's more than random that this is occurring. So if we have corruption in one place and corruption in another place, it's certainly not random that this is going on. There's something else going on. And then what you do is then you want to look for the patterns of causality that leads to this.
Howard, I have been showing my viewers multiple interviews of township officials, experts, and candidates, circumstances that are going on in Delaware County. A one-party rule, things like gerrymandering, problems of health care, and other factors. If people that don't live in Delaware County recognize identical circumstances to their town, how can sociology help them learn about their own hometown?
I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell exactly what type of corruption is going to occur where. No communities are identical. If you have certain things in one area and you go to another similar area, you might look to see if the same things are going on there. Often they are.
Well, Howard, that's all we have time for today.
Okay.
I want to thank you for being a guest
It's been a
on
pleasure.
Delaware County Political News. We have been here with Dr. Howard Robboy, sociologist, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. If you like this show, please don't forget to follow, like, share, and subscribe, and forward this link of the show to all the friends on your contact list and Facebook friends. Please stay tuned for part 2, where Dr. Howard Robboy discusses security on campus and campus crime. We're signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.